On this episode, we talk to Toby Johncox, the head of sales at Enness Global Mortgages. We talk about working with super high net worth clients, building culture in a sales team, what Enness has to offer, and much more. Now it's time to spend 30 minutes in finance.
So I'm Toby Johncox. I'm Enness's head of sales. I've been with Enness for 7 years. Prior to that, I was working for an insurance company. And before that, I was working with one of the more, London's larger sort of retail mortgage brokerage. I moved to Dubai 8 years ago with my wife's job, and then came across Hugh Jones on the front cover of Mortgage Strategy, telling everyone that he was going to open an office in Dubai. And I quickly LinkedIn him, saying that I'd like the opportunity to run that office. We did that, and that was hugely successful. So we did that for 6 years, and we now have a team of 4 brokers and an accountant out there. And then I recently moved back to Enness's office in London, helped run the team here. In terms of what I'm doing when I'm not mortgage broking, I'm based in Windsor, which for those that know me will know that I think it's the best town in England. I have a young family. That's me in short, really.
No, that's perfect. And thank you, obviously, for coming on, Toby. Really appreciate you taking your time. Obviously, you've been working for Enness for a while. Are you able to give us a sort of quick overview of what Enness is and sort of where they sit in the industry?
Yeah, whether I can do justice to the sort of machine that we have now in quickly, but I'll try not to linger on any of the business lines, because Enness has been trading for 15 plus years. We're still co-owned by the founders, Hugh and Isla, and we now have a third investor, which is Nigel Lacane. And we were founded as a prime real estate mortgage brokerage. So Hugh and Isla found themselves frustrated within a retail brokerage, unable to service the best and most interesting clients that were coming across their desk, and they founded Enness. And the view was with Enness that we would go out there into the world and find globally mobile, interesting people who possibly didn't fit through the round hole that is sort of the UK retail mortgage market, right? And through that process, we developed a business that does just over $1 billion a year worth of lending, works with over 500 lenders, and has offices in Dubai, Jersey, Geneva, Zurich, Monaco, and London. Wow. We currently have 20 plus advisors. We have an average loan amount which sits just below £4 million. That business has grown substantially now, and mortgages accounts for maybe one of 3 business lines that we have. And when I say mortgages, I'm referring to the UK and residential and investment mortgages, commercial and development financing, bridging and mezzanine financing. We then do all of that in Europe, but predominantly residential investment properties and bridging debt through all of Western Europe, and again the same in the United Arab Emirates. On top of that, we have a team which is securities-backed lending, which is fundamentally the lending against big single-line stocks and shares, whereby possibly some of the other big institutions haven't been able to assist. We're more than happy to work with clients through a panel of lenders to secure debt against their investment holdings. And we also have a corporate finance team, which is one of the most exciting teams at the moment in terms of growth. And they are delivering debt solutions for companies. So whether that's invoice discounting, partnership buyouts, merger and acquisitions, they're helping all our high net worth clients with their business aspirations. So creating liquidity within the business to do exciting things. So those are our sort of 3 core pillars of lending. We also do a few other bits around that to include luxury asset financing and everything else that might be fun. Certainly those are our core 3. So I
Wow.
think that's a pretty good overview of what's Enness up to, and sort of how do we think we differentiate ourselves in the market. I'd say certainly one of our key USPs would be the high level of service. We don't operate a model whereby we do lots and lots of mortgages each year, but we service a few very good clients very well. And I guess that sort of allows, not stacking up clients and making sure we service them well, whilst charging a sensible fee for the time and work that we put into the transactions to utilize our lender knowledge and approach. Has sort of given us a nice place within the market.
Yeah, wow. That is yeah, it is a serious machine, isn't it? And as I was saying, obviously, prior to sort of starting the recording, Enness does have a certain air about it when you sort of talk to people. And as I mentioned, I was saying that you were coming on, and obviously everybody sort of is in awe of kind of what has been achieved and what you guys are doing. And I think a lot of them do want to replicate something similar to that. From my experience. And what specific part of that do you focus on?
Well, so my role within the company is group head of sales. So I'm responsible for the management of all the sales teams through all the offices and business lines, along with our business development team and sales support team. So I just coordinate everyone together. And I think the main part of my job is providing a platform that will allow the advisors to flourish, right? And B, creating an environment of connectivity where we are always putting our best striker up front, right? So rather than brokers holding on to deals where they're maybe not experienced enough in that right business line, they're incentivized and encouraged to share deals, but also share information about lenders and how best to go about closing on transactions, for the best outcome for the clients, right? So creating a foundation and a shared business of information, I think, is probably my sort of main job. And then obviously all that other fun stuff that comes with management, like keeping people on their toes and all that exciting stuff.
Yeah, because I can imagine, and that sounds like a really sort of unique way of doing it. Because from my experience and talking to other places, that it's a bit of a sort of dog eat dog world at times out there. And obviously, if you get a really good client, and the sort of clients that you deal with, I would imagine that it's not always easy to want to hand that over to somebody that is better than you, maybe a particular
I think
bit.
The point there, right, is if you have a world-class client, and I say that, net worth plus 50 million, who has significant assets across many different jurisdictions and sort of industries or asset types, right? So, I might be the best person in the office to look after their UK prime residents, for the Saudi Arabian chap who has a big house in London and he's just looking at putting his mortgage in order. For whatever reason, he's got the mortgage there, but he's also got business interests in London and he's struggling to grow those and looking for some liquidity there. He's also got investment holdings in Switzerland. I know he's got 50 million quid in SpaceX or one of these other stocks and shares that people have invested in. I'm not the best person to try and grab all of that, right? But if we and also I might not be the best person just to try and hit them with a mortgage application, because that might also not be what's the best outcome for what they're trying to achieve, right? So what we're trying to foster in our approach, I suppose, is to find the clients, whether that's me or someone else finding them, having a high level and broad discussion with them about all of their assets, liabilities, and really what they're looking to achieve, right? And then trying to put the correct team in front of them to make a proposal that's most efficient, I don't know, from a tax perspective or from a speed perspective or from a price perspective, right? Because, it might be efficient for them to borrow against the house, but it might be cheaper and quicker for them to borrow against a line of shares, or it might be that actually borrowing against the house is tax inefficient if they're looking to invest in their company, and they could look at leveraging assets within the company and doing something more creative, right? So I think rather than being a sort of sledgehammer that's trying to whack a nail into a piece of plyboard, we're trying to sort of be maybe a little bit more sophisticated is the wrong word, but helicopter view of what they're doing, so we can make the best recommendation for the client, right? So I'd hate to say that's consultancy type approach, but certainly because we have many business lines and many areas of expertise, we're able to sort of move a client around those business lines to make sure the outcome is correct, right?
Yes, it's a really interesting sort of point. And are you happy sort of talking about sort of how you actually go about sort of sharing that out through the team? And obviously, let's say if somebody finds the client, but then isn't the best person to help them at all, how they sort of go about getting remunerated for that at all. Is that something you're happy to talk about?
Yeah, look, of course, there's no big secret, right? So I think it's a culture that we've fostered over quite a few years, right? I think, as you said, the traditional brokerage model is sort of each man for themselves, right? And I guess we've tried to foster very much a team approach to transacting, which I think for us has worked really well. It hasn't been overnight success, but it's taken years and it's become a great success to do so. But also, obviously, they're all remunerated for cross referrals. So there's a share of the commission pool that is divvied out to those that were involved in the sharing or referring of business.
Perfect. And how do you actually go about finding these clients? Because I would imagine everyone is after them.
That's the secret. That's the secret sauce, isn't it? Right?
Yeah. Are you gonna share it so everyone can go out and get them? But yeah.
I think we're super fortunate. We've been doing it for 15 years, right? So we've been stomping the streets for a long time. Hugh and I are some of the best business development minds, I think, within the industry. If they listen to this, then sorry, but yeah, they're certainly experts, and I think that's filtered down through the business. This sort of attitude of developing yourself and being a person of value is to go out and create your own opportunity, right? The business is fortunate enough to be able to provide many clients for all of our advisors, but those that really excel are those that also nurture relationship within all the other private client advisors out there. So I won't go too much into detail, but you certainly don't find them sitting behind your computer screen in your office waiting for the phone to ring, right?
Yeah, I can imagine with those kind of things, it's a lot of sort of knocking on doors and, well, maybe not literally, but possibly probably wouldn't get through
them down, I think.
Yeah. As how many actually advisors do you have?
I think we're on 24 at the moment.
Okay, so it's a pretty big team, which is
team.
Yeah. So
that's spread out across the world, right? So we have 4 in Dubai, we have a couple in Monaco, we have a couple in Jersey, we have a sort of network of people in Switzerland, and then also our main hub, which is London, where the number is not on top of my head, but we have, I don't know, 10 to 15 advisors at the moment.
Yeah, so it is a pretty big team, and obviously spread out gives you a whole lot of, because I would imagine in sort of various countries they'll have all sorts of different potential solutions. I was talking to somebody that does quite a lot of business in America, and they've got products and things that we just don't have, or I don't know about them in the UK. And I would imagine, is that the case? Is there sort of different sort of options across the world, or are you guys sort of able to do pretty much everything anyway?
I think there's a what's the right phrase? There's an interest rate for everyone, isn't there? Right. I think there's a solution for all shapes and size of client, and those are sometimes issued and provided for on the high street. Sometimes those are UK private banks. Sometimes it's European or Swiss private banks, the Middle Eastern private banks, the American lenders, as you mentioned. And I guess our panel, if you want to call it a panel, but we prefer not to. Of sort of 500 plus lenders is everyone from your one man up the road who lends a bit of money and does that sort of quite nimbly, all the way through to the sort of world's biggest institutions. And I guess by opening that breadth of lender network, we're typically able to solve a problem for everyone, right? And I guess in terms of the growth of the business, we've sort of always worked with high net worths, and as their requirements to us have changed or developed, then we've had to develop as well. So, how did we start the SPL team, or how do we start the corporate team? It was really when we saw sight of that demand, right? People coming to us asking those questions, and then just going out there and developing an offering for them, right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting space, and something that we could probably go into for the whole half an hour in itself, is just to sort of dealing with those. But we'll kind of move on a little bit, and maybe we'll get you back on in a few months or so, if you want to come back and discuss them. But with the sort of, you said there's a sort of interest rate, or potentially for everyone. That's saying, how have these actual recent rises impacted the sort of clients that you get?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? And I think the sort of interest rate fears that the press are pushing into everyone, which are real fears, right? Which is it has had an impact on our business. Although that said, we moved ourselves away really from doing lots of retail applications. But how have the interest rate hikes affected larger ticket borrowers, right? I guess there's those that are aspirational, that are looking to buy properties in prime London, take that as a place, who are still transacting. The very best properties in London are still, as you'll appreciate, sort of flying off the shelves, and those are quite a competitive market in terms of what's going on there. Interest rate, certainly at the start of the year or the end of last year, we saw a sort of nervousness, or a sort of uncomfortableness about how people look at interest rates. Gosh, it's got so expensive. But I think latterly, people have come to terms with the idea that interest rates are high and higher, and they're going to sort of stay that way for a while, right? I think we'd also have to consider why high net worth people are borrowing when often they don't need to borrow the money. So that comes down to the opportunity cost of having that money stuck in a property, rather than being able to invest in either the markets or private equity or venture capital, or in their own businesses. And often, even if you're paying a higher interest rate, if you can make that money work better elsewhere, then it still makes sense to borrow. Or the sort of age-old inheritance tax play that most of them were operating on, that's probably become less common, just because the cost of the borrowing sort of eats away at your saving a bit quicker. But there's still plenty of good reasons for people to borrow, and to transact and do business, right? And I think that's where we've been lucky, is because we're spread across multiple business lines. We've been able to sort of be mobile in where we're deploying our best efforts, but also in terms of the scope of options we're able to provide a client. We're not reliant on mortgage products solely, right, to service the client's requirements. So we're able to find cheaper money elsewhere, or better ways of doing things. So I think that's played into our advantage. And I think, if anything, if you're thinking of, you look all over LinkedIn, and brokers having a hard time at the moment, well, I think it's fair to say that interest rates have caused headache in the sort of lending broking community or world, right? But it does also present a great opportunity to us who are in this industry, where it's becoming more and more difficult for people to borrow. It's becoming less and less transparent, I suppose, as to what's going to happen in the future, and how their product might look and feel, given interest rates going up and down and left and right. And I think that presents a good advisor, an opportunity to be a great advisor, right? Given clients are likely to need better advice, and I think that just creates it will ultimately, when market returns and becomes busy again, give brokers a great opportunity to become really key advisors in the world of real estate, right?
Yeah, no, I think it is an interesting one, because I did have another broker on not too long ago that deals with sort of high net worth individuals, mostly from sort of Africa. That was sort of the sort of wealthy, those kind of sort of business people, mostly from Africa. And he was saying that they are less sort of the impact from the interest rates generally less than them, because they just have things that are, the return is so much greater, and they generally take on things that, you know, aren't as fine margins. But yeah, it's an interesting one to kind of
I'd agree. I think it's less so difficulty presented, it's less so the sort of client mindset or client customer mindset, because to some extent to them they're going to work their numbers out, right, and they can afford what they can afford. And if that was a £3 million house and it's now a £2.5 million house, then they'll just adjust accordingly, right? I think the greater difficulty is in the unknown of interest rates and the impact that's had on rushes to submit to banks to save interest rates, which has created a clogged pipeline, or the unknown. You know, banks are delving deeper into applications than maybe they were a year ago. They're stress testing, certainly in the world of buy-to-lets, at a much more aggressive rate. Obviously, the interest rates are higher. So that's created the greater difficulty, or the greater battle that brokers are having, is with the banks, right? And moving an application from sign up through to closing, which is where obviously we make our money, rather than the sort of client attitude. I think that sort of adjustment has happened now, and then people are far more used to the idea of you saying it's a 5, 6, 7% mortgage rate. The bank piece is the much stickier thing, but you know, as they get on top of the backlog of applications and everything else, that will all settle down as well.
No, it is. Yeah, I find it a fascinating area, and something that, you know, we work on the absolute other end. Like, our average deal is probably around about 150,000, something like that. So you're not too far off 40 times that, which is a different scale, and that's why I find it really interesting to talk to sort of somebody like you, and just get an idea of what that world is like. And that kind of brings us sort of neatly on to the question that we had from our previous guest. And as I mentioned, on every episode, our current guest or our previous guest asks our current guest a question. And our last guest was Steve Smith from Mint. And he has asked, how does Toby's experience in Dubai compare and contrast with the property market in London? And how has that experience helped you deal with larger and more complex transactions in the UK? So it's not the easiest one, maybe, but give it your best shot. You can have a second to think about it as well.
Our international offices, right? So we take Dubai as the example. The focus of the Dubai office is, or has historically not been, processing or selling mortgages on UAE real estate. When I was first out there, the aim was really to meet every wealthy Kuwaiti, Saudi Arabian, Qatari, UAE national, Omani, Bahraini, hopefully I haven't forgotten any, national and resident who is transacting on super prime UK property, right?
Okay, yeah.
And the Dubai office has then since become really our rest of world office. So they service clients from Asia, Australasia, the US, really anywhere outside of Europe, right? And they have become experts in doing so. And I think probably the best thing that's come out of me living overseas was you have no friends, right, when you go overseas, so you have to make friends. And by nature of everyone out there wanting to make friends with, it's quite easy, but also everyone kind of does the same job. So in London, when you're networking, there's there's a bigger barrier to entry, right? People have their established network and their friends and family around them. Whereas when you rock up in the Middle East knowing no one, you're sort of forced to make friends, and by nature of your job, you make friends with people within your industry, and those create your opportunities to transact. The Middle East also is an amazing place where the attitude is very can do. You know, we can achieve anything. So, you know, traveling for the morning to Saudi Arabia or jumping on a plane for a night in Qatar is as difficult as getting the train home from London, right? So, and people are willing to meet and explore and understand what you're about, and I guess that exposure for me was invaluable. A, because of the network it's fortunately built for me, but also then the experience it gives you when you come into London. And also when you are servicing internationally complicated people, which is really where we add value to clients. It's in the round peg square hole scenario. Becoming one of them to an extent, right? I'm not claiming to be an ultra high net worth based Dubai person, but when you start learning and having to understand the difficulty in getting certain documents together, or what a proof of address looks like in Riyadh, or what that looks like in Uzbekistan or wherever, right? When you're exposed to the same thing in your own life, it gives you an acute understanding of the sort of difficulties that high net worths or globally mobile high net worths are facing. So I think that exposure is also pretty invaluable, and it's one of the big USPs of Enness is our direct understanding of local markets that we are actually based in, rather than markets that we just look at from London.
Yeah, because it's absolutely a fascinating space. And is there any kind of difference between sort of selling to, let's say, sort of Dubai, than the sort of clientele that you get based in London?
I guess the major difference is when clients based in the UK are already contained within a pretty robust legal and tax system. So typically, even the most unusual people, they have end of year tax returns, albeit they might not show much. They have company accounts, albeit they might be well accounted for, or they have variously recognizable third parties around them that can vouch or give recommendation on their income and expenditure and assets and liabilities, right? Whereas if you take the Middle East as an example, just because I've lived there, at the moment a lot of that framework doesn't exist. So you might own 300 cranes in Riyadh, but you share bank statements as a person and the company, right? You have no differentiator between that. So seeing what someone's income is becomes more complicated. You might find that multi-generationally they live together, or they live on the same compound, or they work within a family business, and paperworking or creating a profile for them isn't as easy to come by as maybe the sort of UK buyer. So that's probably the main difference. It's just, certainly if we consider our London lending or our UK lending business, then, or lending brokerage business, then it's trying to make sure that people from other parts of the world can tick all the various boxes that we here in the UK require in order to lend some money on their house or on anything else that they're invested in. So I think that's probably the biggest differentiator between local and international clients, is they just don't look the same, right? And that's not physically, that's from a paper trail and how they operate and the things that are expected of them to meet their minimum requirements. They're just different. So, where we have the office in Dubai, people who are acutely aware of how it looks, we're seeing clients at their homes in Jeddah, Riyadh, Oman, and we're able to spend the time, because we don't do lots of mortgages, we do a few very good quality mortgages. We're able to spend and invest the time in fully understanding them, so that we can then present to them what they can do to make sure that they will have a successful application.
Yeah, it sounds like you're sort of the opposite of fair few brokers that we know that take a sort of scattergun approach to it. You're the absolute opposite, sort of complete laser focused on a select few of very good sort of clients that you can hopefully build a sort of long-term sort of relationship with, which, yeah, it's a really
very much so. And I think in that as well, rather than being an order taker, I need to borrow £500,000, this is the cheapest rate. We'd like to think that we add value within the overall transaction, outside of just doing the mortgage application, in terms of being a client's representative, when discussing things with lawyers or with real estate agents or tax advisors, and trying to make sure that we're quarterbacking the transaction so that it moves from A to B as quickly and as painfully as possible, including all the other things they have to worry about, not just the mortgage application. So we talk about internally building the client team from day one. So, you know, making sure that clients are speaking with lawyers that we're well versed with, working with, discussing things with valuers so that we know the outcome valuations, speaking to tax and structurers to make sure that, you know, if they do require it to be owned in a corporate structure, that they've got that set up early and it's the best structure for them, or in fact that they might actually not want to hold it in a structure for various other reasons. So just sort of building a team around the clients to make sure that there's no last minute panic. So I've forgotten to do this, or I haven't done that, which is really what creates a stress within all that whole process, right? And I'm talking mainly my speciality, which is the real estate stuff. You know, the last thing you want is to get to right to the end of a remortgage to release equity for a client to do something exciting with, and the property down values. And actually, if you'd known it was going to value at that in the first place, you might have used a completely different lender. So trying to remove any variable parts to the transaction gives us and the client the best chance of success, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely, and you know, like I said, we could probably spend a good couple of hours talking of that, and I'm conscious of the time, so I don't want to keep you too long. But if somebody
I'll run out of things that are interesting to talk about.
Absolutely, no, I doubt it. With the sort of clients that you guys deal with, not that you can maybe share any specifics, but there's probably quite a bit in there. But as I'm conscious, it is only 30 minutes in finance. So where can, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, where can they go?
So I think the best place to make a general inquiry would be, of course, to start our website, or we can be found on LinkedIn, or very easily just Google Enness, and we invest enough time and effort into our website that we should come up first. And I'm very happy to meet and talk to anyone who's interested in what we're up to, who's interested in introducing clients, or in fact interested in borrowing money themselves. We're always very happy to speak to anyone, shape, size, and interest, regardless.
No, that's perfect. And I just want to take this time to say thank you ever so much for coming on. It's been really, really interesting for me, and something that I'll take away some of those points as well to sort of implement, and hopefully people listening as well can do the same, because it is aspirational sort of stuff where you guys are operating. So it's been really, really insightful. So thanks so much for your time, Toby. Really appreciate it.
And appreciate your time. Thank you for inviting us on. It's been it's been nice to chat to someone I've never spoken to before about it. So it's been good fun as well. And hopefully next time we can do it on video once you've grown your podcast. But yeah, no, it's super. So appreciate your time. Thank you so much.